Batman Cape Crusader, a series that is a spiritual successor to Batman the Animated Series from the 90s, and is also created by the same man in Bruce Timm, who brought on a lot of people along the way with him that made this series very special in my opinion. The show's very underrated and there's a lot to talk about with it, so without ado, let's get into it. Batman Cape Crusader.
You're now watching The Captain.
So for starters, obviously this show is going to garner a lot of nostalgia for a lot of fans who reminisce on the animated series and maybe watch that series very frequently. It's based in what seems like to be like a 60s era that is very noirish feeling as a genre, and features a lot of characters who are very close and well known. Look at the production side of things and kind of speak on the people that were involved in that really quickly. Obviously Bruce Timm is somebody who is infamous in the world of Batman. He's infamously built up the main thing that is the standard of Batman content, being the animated series, and also worked on a lot of stuff with the animated series of the Justice League and a lot of other movies and things of that nature that involved Batman. So besides Bruce Timm, there are other people who helped to produce this film, and there are two notable names that I think a lot of people will recognize here immediately when I bring them off: Matt Reeves and J.J. Abrams. If you haven't been living under a rock the last couple years, you're probably aware of The Batman starring Robert Pattinson. If you don't know, Matt Reeves was the director of that. So he's worked on a really big piece of Batman content that, at least for me, is well received, and I think a lot of people received that film very well. J.J. Abrams is a very interesting name in this because if people are not aware, he worked on a lot of the new sequel Star Wars stuff that was coming around. So for me, as being a Star Wars fan, loving Batman and seeing all these names in here, it was really impressive to me. And obviously Sam Register is also in this. You kind of just see this man's name on like anything DC related at this point, but he's gonna get a check. So to get the production side out the way, let's go ahead and talk about some of the notable characters in this series. Obviously you're gonna see the notable characters like Batman, Alfred, Commissioner Gordon, Barbara Gordon, these staples that you see in pretty much every piece of Batman content that ever existed. But there are some more characters that come in that are not new characters, but they're very interesting in the spin that is given on them. So to get into the actual character aspect of it and kind of speak on a lot of these characters and who they are and how they operate, I just want to let you guys know there's a lot of characters in this show that you are probably going to be familiar with if you haven't watched it already. Characters that if you've seen any other piece of Batman content historically, from the game to the movies to the shows, you will recognize these people. Batman, obviously, Alfred, Commissioner Gordon, Barbara Gordon, Harvey Bullock, Detective Flash, Renee Montoya, these staple characters that you see a lot. So because there's not a new influx of Batman characters, it does make for an interesting thing that they do here where they put a lot of spin on a lot of these characters. And no, I don't mean the race swapping or the gender swapping, because that's been another thing and point of contention that I'm not going to get into already. I've already pissed off a lot of people with the Star Wars stuff. But just know, in regards to race swapping characters or gender swapping characters, my philosophy on this thing is, I haven't mentioned this on the channel yet, if a character's ethnic origin or racial background is not indicative of their background and what makes them who they are, then you can race swap that character. I don't necessarily care. For example, Johnny Storm, it in no way says that him being white or any other background he has, maybe him being Jewish or him being Austrian or whatever Eurocentric country he may be from in the comics, is not indicative of his ability to become an astronaut, go into space, and become Johnny Storm, the Human Torch. But somebody like T'Challa, Black Panther, who is literally the king of an African nation, and African culture and all these other things are indicative of what makes him who he is, making him Caucasian doesn't really make a lot of sense. So again, if you can apply this logic to any other character in existence, if a director or writer wants to race swap a character and they don't fall underneath that criteria, if a writer, director, or whoever else wants to race swap a character and they can follow those credences that I laid out, I personally do not care. I don't think it affects the story too much. And with this show in particular, it doesn't really, in my opinion. Most notably with the Penguin being gender swapped into a woman, that doesn't really change in any way how I see the Penguin operating. In my experience with this show and how I've seen Penguin historically, they pretty much act like mirror images of each other, except one has boobs and one doesn't. But getting into a lot of the things that are changed with these characters besides their race or their gender, the way that they interact with each other and the influences that they have on the story is very interesting. Most notably and almost most impressive to me was that of Detective Flask and Detective Harvey Bullock. These two were essentially the most well-known corrupt cops on the force, and they very much so acted like it in the series. They were villains in very much a similar vein to like Joffrey Baratheon from Game of Thrones, where you just love to hate them. Whenever they would do something evil, it almost made me a little happy because I'm just like, yeah, hopefully we're building towards them getting their comeuppance at some point, which they do by the end of the series. Spoiler alert, sorry. But they were just really evil and really bad in the best way and really sly about it. I really enjoyed them being around and the impact they had on the story throughout the entire season. Also, in regards to characters that are a little bit changed, we are to move into the villain aspect of stuff. Batman and his Rogues Gallery is probably one of the most infamous groups of characters that you see in comic book history. These Rogue Gallery characters are very influential in what makes Batman so great. Although Batman aesthetically and as a character is very interesting, to me at least 70% of what makes him great and 70% of what makes any good hero great are the villains that are attached to him. In this, seeing the Rogues Gallery of villains he has throughout this season, they were very complimentary of this Batman and how he operates. Characters like Firefly were very interesting to me because they made it a big point into show you that the mental health aspect of a lot of these characters were very, very instrumental in them being villains in the begin with. They would do things subtly like with Firefly to where you would see how he saw the world. There's a scene in particular in the episode he's in where you see him finally regain all his hardware and his suit and all that good stuff, and he puts on his goggles and you see how he sees the world through his goggles. He is literally seeing a world of fire and seeing people on fire, seeing buildings on fire, and that's in his mind how things should be, so he wants to restore things to their natural order. This is very interesting to me because it adds a little bit more of a layer to the character to where he's not just evil for the sake of being evil. He, at least in his own sadistic mind, has a reasoning for why he does the thing he does, and that motivation is something that can be contextualized in a lot of different ways and gives a lot more of a context and a layered thing there where you can play around with that in the storytelling, which I think they did here in regards to him being so one-track minded and being easily manipulated into being a pawn essentially, but then also being very dangerous and showing a lot of impact on the world around him. It was really dope to me. Moving on to my favorite villain from this season that I think was really impactful and was really eerie and creepy, Dr. Harleen Quinzel. Everybody is aware of Harley Quinn. You've seen the shows. You've seen Harley Quinn in the Arkham series. You've seen her in a lot of different ways in the comics. But this way that she was portrayed is something that I've only seen uniquely to this show. And I just want to applaud whoever was a part in writing this character because it was done really well. Dr. Harleen Quinzel is just that, a doctor, and her expertise in being a therapist and understanding the human mind is something that is very, very much so doubled down on in this show, and I don't think it's doubled down on as much in later iterations of the character and other stuff like the games and the shows and whatnot. I usually see Harley Quinn in TV shows and movies be in a scenario to where she gives like a quick line that can kind of remind people like, yeah, I did go to school. I do have a doctorate in therapy and psychological understanding of things. But in this show, you see it a lot in action. So you're obviously introduced to her through Bruce Wayne being a client of hers. And if you aren't familiar with Bruce and how he operates as Batman, you're aware that Batman is not the mask. Batman is the person and Bruce Wayne is the mask. That is something that Dr. Quinzel deduces like immediately. She sees that he's putting up this wall that is just insurmountable of a climb, and she says that, I think verbatim damn near in the show, and she just can read him inside and out immediately, and showcasing that she can even think 2 steps ahead of him in certain occasions. There's a moment to where Bruce is in a therapy session and you see him go back into his vehicle to kind of head back to wherever he's going, and you notice that he stole his patient records so he can kind of see in her mind how she's seeing him and what she's writing down in regards to his case file. You find that when he opens this, all of there's left is a note that she wrote to him talking about how much fun and how great she had of a session and looking forward to coming into the next session. For her to be a mental step ahead of Batman shows just how well of a great mind she is in this show and how dangerous she potentially is. And damn, is she dangerous. This episode she's in essentially is showcasing how a lot of people are of the rich caliber doing wild shit in regards to giving away all their money. I don't know if y'all know any rich people, especially rich white men. I don't see them giving away everything they have to charities and things of that nature. But that's what happens here. They're giving away all their money and all their assets to charity, but then they usually themselves at some point in the episode. So what happens in this episode essentially is that Harley Quinn is taking all of her clients that she has, all these rich people that are coming to her for therapy, and she's trying to, like nicely nudge them into being good people and giving some money away or just being good people all around. And as she sees them just refusing to change or just refusing to be good people, she then takes it upon herself to kidnap them and brainwash them into being her essential puppets and has them do her bidding. And when she's revealed to be the villain and you see her in her entire Harley Quinn getup, they make her so cold. And the fact she is so cold and like almost dead in the eyes is so sick to me, and it makes her so intimidating, and honestly makes me wish that we saw her as a main villain in like this season or the second season. This first season is mostly revolved around Harvey Dent Two-Face, and it sadly seems like this second season is going to be revolving around the Joker, but I would have loved to see her get a bigger role in being a villain in this show. And maybe if we get future seasons of it, maybe she's a bigger part going forward, because her character was mwah. Like seeing her being all bubbly and loud and boisterous throughout the series, and then seeing her where she takes that mask off, almost similar to Bruce Wayne, and becomes the Harley Quinn, and seeing how cold she is in her eyes and her speech and dialogue was just beautiful. I love seeing this version of Harley Quinn. It's maybe my favorite version of Harley Quinn I've seen outside of the funny stuff, but this was sick. I loved her in this series. Although there are a lot of other villains to discuss in this series, again, if you want me to speak on those people and want to kind of see more of my thoughts on this, I'll probably stream it at some point. Let me know in the comments below. I just don't want to like tackle every single villain in the 10 episodes in this video. The last villain I want to discuss is going to be the main villain of this season, and the guy that's gotten the most kind of consistent development throughout the show, being Harvey Dent, aka Two-Face. I loved how they showed Two-Face's descent into madness. They showcased how his morality was, how his code of ethics worked, and how he maybe had bent those a little bit throughout him growing up and getting into the position of being a district attorney, and even into his candidacy of being the mayor in this series. He just felt like a really fleshed out, well-rounded person by the end of the show, and it was amazing to see. If I had to give one sense of criticism and maybe critique with the character that I thought could have been done a little bit better, was a little bit on the voice acting side of things. Although I love Diedrich Bader's version of him as Harvey Dent, I felt like it was a little bit weak in regards to the separation of Harvey Dent into Two-Face. For people that aren't aware, Two-Face is a person in the series who is literally two different people at all times. And I thought it was done extremely well in the animated series, to where the actor of that series was having to play a very soft-spoken character on one side where he was Harvey Dent, but when he went into the Two-Face, that voice was like really gravelly and darker, and it was very distinguishable from the other one. In this series, it felt like Harvey Dent and Two-Face were like the same person, but Two-Face was just more menacing from a action standpoint. But they felt very similar in regards to like tonality. He didn't come across as super intimidating to me, even though he was doing some cracked out, intimidating shit, like literally just becoming Batman essentially, because you see in this moment where he fully snaps and becomes Two-Face and decides to go take revenge on the people that did this to him. I'm not going to give a lot of spoilers on that. You essentially see him break into the hideout of the villains that caused him to become Two-Face, and he is literally like on some Batman shit where he is taking out each of them one by one, and not just taking them out in the sense of knocking them out like Batman would. He's murdering these people. He is literally an assassin in this mode. I don't know how him becoming Two-Face gave him ninja assassin skills, but I was digging it. I thought that was amazing in the way it was done. I just feel like it could have been a 10 out of 10 performance and moment for me if that Two-Face voice was just a little bit deeper or raspier. I don't know. That was personally me. I enjoyed the performance, but I thought it could have been a little bit better in that aspect. That'll be all the villains I'm going to speak on for now. There are a lot of other great villains in this series in regards to Clayface, the Gentleman Ghost, and others that I felt like were very, very interesting and provided a lot of dopeness to the show. But again, if you want to see me speak on them in more detail, you can catch me live over on Twitch. But now for the moment of truth, the character that everyone has been waiting for me to speak about, that of Bruce Wayne, the Batman. This man in this particular iteration of the character was so interesting to me and explored a side of Batman that I don't think a lot of other writers for the character explore as much. There are different instances and iterations of the character where they kind of speak to Batman's fragile mental health, but this show really doubles down on that. When you hear the phrasing of Batman being the identity and Bruce Wayne being the mask and the persona that he puts on for other people, that is very apparent in this series. There are moments where you see him speak to other people outside of Alfred in real life as Bruce Wayne, and you'll see moments where he cracks and his voice will literally become deeper. A lot of what I wanted out of Harvey Dent, I got in Batman, to where when he is Batman, his voice drops an octave and he gets a little bit more gravelly, and it becomes very distinct and different from his Bruce Wayne voice. Very similar to how the infamous Kevin Conroy did his voice for the character. But when he does this, you'll see different iterations where he kind of snaps and loses composure and becomes Batman. The mask drops. Most infamously, in the best possible way I think I've seen this done, is in the very last episode, in episode 10. You're seeing him as Bruce Wayne speaking to Harvey Dent in his jail cell, trying to convince him to let Barbara Gordon take him on as a client to be his pretty much defendant in a court case. And Harvey Dent is kind of doing the whole woe is me thing and speaking on his ethics and his morality and the actions that got him there to that point. And you see Bruce kind of snap and literally get into that Batman voice and pretty much say, don't gain a conscience now. Why are you gaining a conscience now? Why are you trying to be a good person now, Dent? And it literally feels like, from watching that moment, like somebody took his body over and became him. This series does an interesting thing to where they don't just make Batman the persona that he is. They make it seem like Batman's almost borderline schizophrenic in a sense. They give you a flashback earlier in the series where you see him as a kid where his parents are murdered and he can't sleep, he's having nightmares, and he wakes up in the middle of the night during a rainstorm and goes to speak to Alfred. And you see him with his eyes like bugged out, and he's very much so like broken at this point where he's just a different person. And he's speaking to Alfred, letting him know like they will all pay. And from that moment on, you see him as this Batman character. My theory on this is that the day his parents were killed was a day that the Batman persona was born, and he went from being Bruce Wayne and becoming Batman from that day forward. And anytime you see him, you are seeing Batman. Like it's not just the persona that he wears, he's a whole different person from the birth of that trauma happening. And it's very interesting in how that's conveyed here. Because this Batman isn't the veteran chiseled Batman you see in a lot of other iterations as well. This is very similar to a year one Batman where he's figuring out a lot of things, and he's very cold to just people in the beginning of the series and not very understanding with how people operate emotionally. He's almost like a borderline sociopath as well. I love to see an actual therapist diagnose this version of Batman. He just feels like a little bit schizophrenic to me, as well as being a little bit of a sociopath where he's just so cut off from other people's emotions, and then he has that duality of him and Batman. And you see that displayed throughout the show as he's speaking with characters like Barbara Gordon, and they're working to sort of humanize him in a sense. As the show goes on, you start to see him pick up little tics and things that you're used to seeing with Batman from watching the animated series. But as he's doing that, you're seeing him interact with Detective Gordon and Barbara more and more, and Detective Renee Montoya. And like I said before, they're working to humanize Batman and make him more of a person. Key example of this in the series, throughout the entire series, he doesn't refer to him as Alfred, he refers to him as Pennyworth. Calling somebody by their last name, at least for me, when in a situation like that where you're the employer, it almost feels like you're dehumanizing them in a sense, to where you don't want to get that familiarity of using their first name, in my opinion. That's how I perceived it. And you see that change in the very end of the show, where he goes through this entire arc and he changes as a person by the end of the series, and he goes to call Alfred by his last name, but then stops himself and calls him Alfred and acknowledges the connection that he shares with that man. I'm not gonna hold you, through a lot of the show, a lot of the sassy shit that Batman was saying to Alfred, I was like, hey bro, you better check that man, like you his daddy, you pretty much his daddy at the end of the day. So the fact that Alfred took a lot of disrespect in this series as well, but it really was interesting to me in how that operated, because you saw Alfred essentially understand that Bruce wasn't Bruce anymore, and Batman was pretty much the person that he raised and was there for. And this Alfred in doing that was very, very submissive in how he was serving Bruce. You're used to seeing Alfred in the capacity to where he's very subservient to Bruce, but he's cracking little snarky remarks and giving hints of wisdom here and there that help to soft push Bruce in the direction that he thinks he should go in. But in this series, like, he gives those hints of gems, I feel like, but he really, like, when Batman steps up to him to kind of G-check him, he kind of steps back and is like, whatever you want to do, Master Bruce, whatever you want to do, Batman, I'm here to serve you as your loyal and humble servant. But by the end of the series, you see them kind of form that father-son bond that you're used to seeing with them. Beyond the characters and beyond the amazing writing, I think one of the things that I'm really enjoying about this series that I kind of took for granted with a lot of stuff going on right now is the episodic nature of the show. I feel like me and a lot of people that watch content lately have been so used and addicted to these long, streamlined stories with things like Game of Thrones or other anime that are popular right now, or other movies, to where it's used to having a story that starts here and you have all this development in this one singular story going to the very end. The episodic nature of shows like this, or maybe like anthology series, is really, really lost, I think, on a lot of people. And it was very kind of refreshing to me to have the fun of a different adventure in every episode. Although there was like a streamlined arc for characters throughout the series, like Harvey Dent was being spoken on and kind of going through his own development throughout the series, each episode still that he was involved in, it showed a new adventure for a new character and a new bit of development that Batman had to go through, and a new way to approach each person in each situation. It was kind of dope to see. And that episodic nature was just so refreshing to me. And it's something that I thought about after I watched the show and that I didn't realize I would appreciate as much. Having that balance there, I think, was just so great for me. And I'm understanding that more as a consumer myself of content, that I love seeing all different types of content be represented in their own respective fields. And stuff like this, I don't think you see as often. You don't see too many episodic shows that also have a hint of development outside of like regular American cartoons. So again, I'd love to see this more and more. And all in all, with Batman Caped Crusader, it was a show that I expected to kind of enjoy from seeing who was working on it, but I didn't expect to love it this much and to have this much nuance and innovation in a series about a character who's been around for 75 plus years now. I feel like we've kind of ridden Batman to death in a lot of different instances, so it was nice to see a fresh take on the character in a sense. It wasn't 100% brand new, but in a lot of different ways he was showcased was a way that I haven't personally seen before in the past, historically looking at Batman. This show, in a lot of ways, for a lot of fans of the original animated series, it was a wet dream. It was a wet dream. Let's keep it a buck here. The only thing that could have made this show 100% perfect for me was if they had the ability to raise the GOAT Kevin Conroy from the grave and allow him to reprise the role as Batman again. But besides that, I really love this show. This show was like a solid, if I had to rank it, like 8 to 9 out of 10 for me. I think that it does a lot of great things well. There's maybe some issues of regards to some writing for certain characters I would love to see a little bit differently. And like I mentioned before, certain performances here and there that I thought could have been a little bit airtight. Not saying that those voice actors shouldn't have those roles, because I think that they match those characters. I just feel like there was personally some decision there as far as the acting that I personally would have liked to see a little bit differently, but to each their own. But at the end of the day, y'all let me know what y'all thought about the series. What did you think about the acting, the writing, the music, all that good stuff? Because, oh yeah, the score was something that was just amazingly well done and accompanying the noirish feel for this show. If you're still around for this point, I'd like to thank you guys for watching the video and for giving me any support that you've given me thus far. If you watched or clicked on any other video, I am supremely thankful for the support and in my growth in this journey of YouTube stuff. And I'm forever thankful. When it comes to this, it's been a bucket list thing for me my entire life to want to grow this channel and become a content creator that can not only help people out and provide a little bit of levity in their lives and some information, but also inspire others like I was inspired by other creators to do. And in saying that, I'm kind of using that as a way to segue into my announcement, letting you guys know that coming up, probably by the time this video is out, I'll be starting streaming again over on my Twitch channel for gaming stuff. I'm going to continue to do my comics and movies and all that good stuff on this channel like I have been doing, but I am going to be adding in some clips and walkthroughs of games that are coming out that I'm really interested in playing, because gaming is also just a big part of me. I want this channel to reflect all aspects of me and the things that I'm interested in. Gaming is a big part of that. And also a part of that is going to be anime. I've not talked about a lot of anime on this channel thus far. It's been mostly comics and some music and horror stuff here and there. But anime is something that I'm also very passionate about, and I think I'm going to be I have a video in mind for something I want to give you guys in the very near future. So again, if you are enjoying what you've seen thus far in this video, or maybe you've seen some other stuff and you want to see more content from me, you want more stuff from me, that's what you can expect in the very near future, and I appreciate any support that you give to me thus far. Again, y'all, this has been Captain Diesel of Captain Diesel's Dojo, and I will see you guys next time. Peace. Y'all be good people.